Hello YouTube and welcome back to a new 15-minute market update. I'm Stefan, full-time day trader and co-founder of 15min. Today I'm going to explain you what I expecting next for the coming week and why the situation in Iran will be really important. I also will explain what it behaves with the Strait of Hamas and what the really important macro events will be for next week, which will decide if we can see a pump on BTC or not. So now let's jump into the markets and I will explain you everything else. Welcome 15min to a new market update from my side. Today I'm going to explain you what happened last week with the Monday pump and the further decrease over the rest of the week, and explain you also what's happening in the stock market, why BTC is still underperforming the stocks and what I expect next for the coming week. So now let's jump into the charts and I will explain you everything what I expect. First of all, when we can see here, my BTC position is still at the same point like a few weeks ago. So we are basically still below the 90k control point. Therefore, this is still a resistance and not a support point, which means we didn't overcome it sustainable. So basically we're at the same point like a few weeks ago. And now I'm going to explain you what happened on Monday. So basically we saw on Monday a really interesting move. So we saw that we pumped over the weekend further higher because of the general new year, and many market participants want the year-end rally, which we pumped on early on January, and therefore on Monday on this level we saw a really interesting moves on the New York session. So we see basically that on the most of the volume was on Coinbase, and as already explained a few months ago, Coinbase is a really retail indicator because that shows activity on Coinbase, and Coinbase is the most important app for retails. Coinbase and Robinhood, there is every retailer investing into it. Also ETF flows are primarily on the data volume from Coinbase. And when we can see here now is that on Monday, when we saw these inflows, on the next day, first we didn't overcome the 94k region, which means the first big asks got hit, as I explained in the last video. We hit those asks, and these asks are very high, as I already explained in the last video, and therefore market makers use this as a perfect trap for those investors. We saw on Monday huge ETF inflows, and in general, many market participants talked about bull run. We're going higher because we're now above the 90k, and market makers knew that. So basically we hit the first asks and then the price decreased again. And it's interesting to see that also the biggest sell volume that sold during this downwards move was again on Coinbase. So basically retail investors pushed their money into this fake pump on Monday before they're pushing it out again in minus. So basically market makers trapped these retail investors, pushing the price higher, getting into FOMO and into greed. Then they bought the top. As we can see at the Coinbase delta volume, there is a huge volume pressure, a huge buy pressure that is not really assistant on other exchanges. And after this one, on the downwards move, Coinbase has also the biggest downwards pressure, which means retailers bought this top and sold the downwards move. So basically perfectly trapped for the retail investors, and therefore it's really interesting what happens. So we are basically still below the 90k control point, and market makers still trapping retails in every direction they can. So if we pump, they're using it as a exit liquidity, and if we drop, they use it also the same. They're shorting it, and after this one they're pumping it higher again. So basically market makers are in a poor manipulation mode, and this we need to understand, and this is also what is really important to understand, that market makers are in a poor manipulation mode. So this is what happened on Monday and the rest of the week. Now let's go into the 25% order book depth. So basically what is interesting to see is that we saw a rising 25% order book depth on this pump, which means that when we go higher, asks decreased and bids came into the market, which means also spot market makers supported these pumps. So which means this was really a huge broad of market makers who moved into this move to exit them on the retails. But this is, to be honest, was a bullish sign that we saw increasing 25% order book while the price is going higher, which means asks are decreasing and bids are supporting this upwards move. So basically, if this wasn't a trap, I would well imagine that we could see a pump above, but more on that later. Currently, the 10% order book depth is still very negative. And if we compare it to the last few ones in this range, every time when we had a negative order book depth at 10%, we can see that BTC always saw a significant downwards move. So this is not really a bullish sign, to be honest. Also, the 25% order book depth shrinking again on this downwards move, which is also really interesting to see. We are going higher and 25% order book depth is going also higher, and we're going lower and 25% order book depth is also going lower, which means, as already said, this was a bullish sign because we went higher, asks are decreasing, bids are coming in, and now we're seeing the same move but reversing. So we're moving lower, asks are coming in, and bids not really coming in. So they are closing their positions and more asks coming in. So also here again, the big spot bid class in the 80k region is still there, but more on this later when I explain my plan for the coming week. Next important point is the total open interest. As already explained last week, this meme coin outperformance and in general altcoin hype isn't really a bullish sign, to be honest, because we are still not getting much liquidity. And we can see here that we peaked around $85 billion open interest, and since this drop from BTC, when we can see here, this was the peak from the open interest, and since then we dropped on BTC, and this is also reflecting on the open interest. Since then we lost around 3 billion on open interest. It's not that much, to be honest, but also not really much coming in. So overall this situation calmed a little bit down, but when we see here on the left side, the market, the volume of the general market is still very low. So basically we're still on the edge of another big move, because when we are going here on the general 1 year market volume bar, we can see still that we have a decreasing volume, and this during a very active activity on the crypto and stock market is still a very rare sign, which means we're still ahead of a very strong move. But it depends in which direction. If it's going higher, also the volume open interest will also surge higher. If we see another drop, volume sees a spike, but open interest would also fall. But more on this later. Also here the sector performance, I mean, we saw a little calm down. Memes peaked on around 45% pump. We are now at around 25%, so we lost half the volume again. I mean, this was abroad of the altcoins that we lost around 50% of the pump again during this upwards move. I mean, also we can see in the total free chart that we see a really interesting pump above the 50% wick fill area, and we are now heading for holding the 50% wick fill area. If we can hold it, further pumps on the altcoins are to expecting, but for this we need to also overcome the 90k control point at BTC. If we can't overclaim it, all altcoins will remove this move again, and we will see the next target, the 100% wick fill area. So basically my plan is still the same. To explain it for you, for me the 90k control point is still the most important region for me at the moment. And we can see also that the 50% wick fill area at the altcoins is also in a very interesting point. So basically for me it's still a small possibility that we can overclaim this 90k control point and see a further short squeeze into the 100k region, because we're seeing stock markets are seeing a year early rally. As already said, if we can hold the $6,880 level, we will see further new all-time highs, and we saw already since then 3 new all-time highs. So basically the stock market is in a really bullish situation, and therefore I can really imagine that market makers trapping retails again like they did it on last Monday, pumping the price above the 90k, pushing it into 100k, and therefore we're seeing more headlines again, like BTC the first time in 2026 above the 100k, the second one BTC the first time since 3 months above the 100k, and this would push more retails into the market. So overall I'm still more bearish, but there is a small possibility that we're seeing a bullish outcome from this, with overcoming the 90k control point, absorbing these asks above us, and pushing into the 100K region to gain more FOMO into retail investors and in general pushing the market higher, as already explained in the last few updates. If we see this, I would definitely short this retest into the 100K because there would many headlines, many high leverage traders revenging their losses from the last drop, and therefore this is not really expecting to be bullish, which means if we can overcome the 90K control point, we would hit the 100K. And if we're seeing some signs like more FOMO, high leverage trades, I would also close my Bitcoin position, because after this one we would definitely see another drop into the 90K, and if we lose this, I would expect the next drop into the 80K region. So if we see a pump into the 100K, I would prefer to close my Bitcoin position and not waiting for the 110K, because if we're seeing an overcame of this, I expect a high leveraged FOMO greedy pump instead of really sustainable hold, because we're seeing a bullish stock market and market participants in crypto want also to see higher prices. This is a small possibility. I give this around 25% chance that we are seeing this. The rest of the 75% are still expecting another drop into the 80K, hitting those hitting those big bits in the 80K region, also filling the 100% wick from this day, and building a double bottom before we went higher. But there's still a small possibility, and with Trump, to be honest, everything is possible. So if we're seeing this, I would close my position. If we're seeing high leverage trades, more FOMO, more greed, and closing them into the 100K region before we went lower again. If we're dropping lower, I will open my position again. So this is my plan currently on BTC. For the altcoins, it's basically also the same, because if we can hold the 90K, we will also see more greed into the altcoins. So basically, but this will also be more fake pumps like the last few ones. So if we're seeing here a hold of the 50% wick fill area, because also BTC sees a 90K control point hold, the next target will be the local resistance. And if we're seeing this BTC also matching with the 100K, I will go full short again into altcoins. For now, I'm still more short because, as already said, it's only a 25% possibility chance that we are heading into the 100K. So I'm more into shorts. And if we can overcome the 90K, I would put a trigger into longs for a minimal short time, as already said, target 100K. Target would be here, the local resistance. If we hit it in this upwards move, I would look for more longs on altcoins. And if we hit the local resistance, I will close this position immediately or push the stop loss break even and went into shorts more again. So this is basically my plan on the altcoins. If we can hit the 100K, the next target will be the local resistance. And if we get rejected because of FOMO buyers and high leverage traders, the next target will be the 50%, and therefore the next the 100% wick fill area. So if we see overcame on the 90K, I will long this pump into the local resistance. If we are seeing FOMO traders and general a really high leverage pump on BTC, I will also short this local resistance at the altcoins, and with the target of the 100% wick fill area. So this is my plan currently on BTC and on the altcoins. On Ethereum, it's basically the same like on BTC. If we can see a further pump on BTC, I also expect it for Ethereum. The next target would be here, definitely this region, around 3.5K. If we can overcome it, also because more FOMO into altcoins on Ethereum, the next target will be the high time frame region into the 4K region. At least there, I expect a bearish reaction. So if we hit the 4K at Ethereum, I will definitely short this one with a stop loss above this high, because I don't expect really overcame of the 54K. Even if we're seeing a FOMO pump into the 100K, the 4K is still a resistance point. So, and here also my end target will be the big long liquidation cluster into the 2.2K region, will also match hand in hand with the 80K drop into BTC. So this is my current update about the crypto market. It's really interesting to see what move we can expect also with the stock market, if we can see a further pump next week, because we're seeing the inflation data. Can we see a further pump or not? Next week will be very important. We are having very much inflation data. So we're basically seeing the CPI inflation from last month and also the October PPI inflation, the producer price index inflation, because of the government shutdown delay. It will start really calm with a Japan bank holiday on Monday. Tuesday, the CPI inflation will come out from last month. Wednesday, producer price inflation from last month. Also, the retail sales and the core retail sales will come out. And the PPI inflation also. On Thursday, we have the GDP from England and also the unemployment claims. The CPI inflation will have an important impact because the last week's NFP data was really mixed. We saw a hot NFP data, so less new jobs came into it, but the unemployment rate dropped by 0.1%, which means the data was really mixed. So we now need to take effect on the CPI inflation. If the CPI inflation in general also sees a cool down, the rate cut odds will rise over the next few months because we still have a low inflation pressure, which is bullish for the Fed. Therefore, it will be interesting if we're seeing a more dovish inflation. We will see definitely more new all-time highs at the SPX. If not, we would see another drop. And therefore, it will be also interesting on BTC because we are in a very important 90K control point. If we're seeing a dovish inflation data, I can well imagine that this would match with the pump above the 90K and pushing into the 100K psychology area because, as we said, it's low 25% possibility, but with dovish data, and maybe also we can gain from the bullish stock market. Therefore, we would see a pump. I mean, if we compare here with a BTC USDT, it's really hard to understand that BTC is not really gaining any momentum because we can see here early on Monday we can see this rise also with the retail trap pushed BTC higher and outperforming the stock market, but since then we can see the stocks generally pushed higher while BTC is still heading lower. So basically BTC is still highly underperforming the stock market, and if we're seeing some dovish inflation data, maybe we can see some more bullish power also into crypto because the dollar is falling and also more risk appetite is coming back. So therefore Tuesday and Wednesday will be very interesting if we can see the small possibility of the overcame or not. If it's dovish, it's more possible. If it's hawkish, we will go definitely lower because it will also have an impact on the stock market. And if we are now underperforming the stock market, it would make no sense if we now outperforming the stock market, so the hawkish data and stocks dropping and BTC now pumping. So this would makes no sense. So if we're seeing a dovish data, the possibility is higher to see this pump into the 100K, and if it's hawkish, the possibility is higher to going lower again. So basically that's my plan for the coming week. And also really important will be the general situation in Iran. As already reported in 50 min, the situation is really escalating. I will put the link below with the article above what is important in Iran and what to know with the markets. Read this because it's really important to understand what's happening out there. So basically this will also important for the coming week if Trump will take some orders there, if we can see another war with another country or not. This will be important the whole next week. As already explained it in the article, if we are seeing such action from Trump into Iran with more attacks, this will definitely have a bearish impact on the markets because of the important Strait of Hamas. Because Iran already said if there is more investigation from America into Iran because of the nuclear program, or in general because they are going into the country and attacking them again, they will close the Strait of Hamas. And this is still important because they have 20% of the oil imports there. So yes, because of the OPEC and the Venezuela situation, there is huge amounts of oil on the markets, but this street still have 20% of the oil imports, which is still a huge amount of the cake. So if this one is closed, we will still have more stress in the stock market, and stress is never bullish for the markets. As I explained in the article, click the link below and read it. It's really important. So this will be also very important the whole next week. If we're seeing something like this, more bearish pressure will come, and this one we will definitely hit going into our 80K target. That's my plan for the coming week. I am really hyped for it. I will keep you updated as always, and we will see us here at the next update. I wish you a great weekend, and we will see us next week. That's it for today's 50-minute market update. I'm really hyped for the next week if we can see an investigation from Trump into Iran, and if yes, what happens with the Strait of Hamas. Above all, I'm really hyped to see what BTC is doing, if we can see a pump into the 100k region, or because of more bearish pressure, a dump into the 80k region. If you don't want to miss updates like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great weekend and we'll see us here at the next 50-minute market update. See you soon.